often the easiest path into a company's or target's network is through social engineering. And I'll be the first to tell you, as someone who's worked on the red team side, running pen tests, that's the first place that we go. And in 99% of the cases, that's the first way we get into a network. So there is absolutely a need from a more, I would say, psychological review of how we address that, I get massive gap there, right? And it continues. That footprint hasn't shrunk at all, in my opinion, over the past 10 years. It remains the biggest threat out there. So does it involve a lot of math? No. If I were ranking this at a risk in a kind of risk framework, and I had limited resources, and I was going to try to increase the cybersecurity posture of any target organization, I'm going to go after that big threat first. So if there are folks who want to get into cyber, there's absolutely a lot of room there for that type of skill set. That being said, there's the other end of the spectrum. There are those folks who like to sit behind 5 different computer screens, and you see the matrix code running down, and then they have their hoodies on, they're playing this weird music in the background. Yes, those folks do exist, and I wouldn't say that all of them are very or have like extensive math skill sets, but there's a level of math that's required when you get into things like disassembling malware and forensics analysis. There's a level of math that's required there. So I'd say you see both sets of the spectrum. But if I were an organization with limited resources, where would I target first? I'm going to go after the biggest risk first, and that is definitely more on the less math concentrated side.
Yeah, and that's a great question, Nicole, and great comments, Warren, as well. And I would agree with it. I mean, there's this unfortunate human psychology, and I think I shared some of these examples, where there's studies that were done on social engineering in the United States, and like the football tickets and baseball tickets were like always like #1 hit. That's how people get in the systems. But in soccer tickets, just nobody cared in the United States. But I'm sure it's the flip in Europe. There is that element, of course. But from my vantage point, maybe especially on the academic side, if we're training the cybersecurity specialists, maybe they have to be a little bit more STEM focused, but the psychology element of it as well also has to be brought in, and maybe also for the workforce development in general. You can have the best cybersecurity specialists in the world working for your organization, but if the workforce is not trained not to click links, there's nothing that cybersecurity specialists are going to do. The CISOs are going to get fired over and over and over again, and there's just not much you can do about it. So yes, absolutely. I think we need to bring all those, multifaceted type of concepts, and really training. I think a lot of it will come down to training as well. Making sure that we have a workforce that understands the threats that are out there and understands the social engineering and the psychology that a lot of the social engineers use today. Even that is changing. It's not the same as it was, 5-10 years ago. So
I have a question. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, yeah. Hi. My name is Natalia, and here me and Dr. Alex, we're coming from Marymount University, is just across the river, how we like to say, from Washington, D.C. So I have actually 2 questions for you guys. The first one is, we are academia. We're actually 2 professors in the IT department, and both of us are leadership fellows in our schools. So you guys said that academia needs to better work with the government and the entities. So we are here. So tell us what we need to do better. So this is the first question. And I really want, because we all the time hear that, like, academia needs to do this, academia needs to do that. But the fact that we're here and we're in person is because we want to do better, but we need your help to tell us what we can do. So this is one question I have. And the second question is, there were a lot of layoffs happening in the big companies lately. We are talking about a couple of tens of thousands of people laid off from Google, Microsoft, AWS. Do you guys think that these people, majority have a sort of IT background, right? So majority of them have sort of IT specialties. Do you think that this will impact the workforce, I guess, balance? Because we are talking about this need for cybersecurity. Now we have like 50,000 people looking for jobs. Is this an opportunity for the cybersecurity to adapt them to cybersecurity fields, and they're already in the IT field? So now we cover at least something of that gap that we have in the workplace. So that's for me.
Sure. I'll try to address it from my vantage point, and so I'm in academia myself at APUS, but one thing that I will say, but being on the Army National Guard side as well, I'm a pretty social person. Typically, what you have with a lot of people who are working in STEM, they're sort of more introverted. They're better with books than they are with people. But in the end, we are in the business of people. We're as human beings, we need to be social. What I realized over the years is sometimes you can send emails, you can send proposals, but if it's like just shooting into the dark, you're not going to have a lot of success. This is why the networking is so unbelievably important. I'm so glad to see that you are out here from academia and you're networking. And my recommendation is continue to network with a lot of people. It's extremely important because I think what ends up happening, and just at least what I've seen, is once you make those connections, be it in the government, in the industry, or wherever else, from academia, maintain those connections, grow those connections, because they'll lead to more connections in other industries, in other academia. So one of the ways that that I kind of try to do this, I do consulting on the side. Why not? And that's one way that I can actually get to meet people from outside of my industry, way outside of my industry, and things that I've never actually worked in before, like the healthcare. Something I never knew about before, but it's a great way to actually go out and learn different things, and different needs are out there. And so my one recommendation is go ahead and socialize, because if you don't socialize, if you think the industry is going to approach you every time, I don't think it's going to happen that way. So hopefully I addressed that question, at least from my vantage point. And please keep in mind, these are all my opinions. I'm not here to say this is the best or not the best way of doing things. As far as the shortage, the 50,000 people who have been recently laid off or fired or whatever from these big techs, I don't know their backgrounds, to be honest with you. I haven't followed the story too closely, but I'm assuming a lot of these people are now from the cybersecurity background, but maybe a significant portion of them are. But what we're seeing in data and the trends is that number for cybersecurity need is not going down. So even if there are 50,000 people now out there looking for jobs, that number, that percentage of unfilled cybersecurity positions, that hasn't gone down. Or maybe the data, maybe there's a little bit of a lag in data, maybe the data hasn't caught up with it yet. But even if you take that 50,000, I think the current shortage in cybersecurity professionals is something like 700,000 in the United States. So that 50,000 will bring it down a little bit, but you're still not talking about a very significant impact that it will have. So I think that need will continue to grow. I think it will still be there. And I think we can, it's an opportunity. It's, some people say it's a challenge, but really I think it's an opportunity for academia to go in, socialize, network, work with the industry, and then kind of, capitalize on that opportunity to train the next workforce. So that's my thoughts on it. Yeah, thank you.
I see. Yeah, Warren, did you want to add something?
No, I think Andre actually hit the exact numbers that I was going to bring up. So worldwide, that gap is about 3.5 million, and he hit the number on the head. So in December of last year, and I would say the we were doing some research to kind of identify what that skill gap is within the U.S. And Andre's spot on. The number is roughly 700,000. So again, to Andre's point, that 50,000, yes, it will help. But that 700,000 is going to continue growing, right? So, and this is likely just to be, a short-term blip, and the economies, they will shrink and grow, and when they shrink a little bit, we will have these layoffs. But it's probably going to be a short-term blip to address, the larger gap, and that gap is going to continue to grow. So, I think yes, to answer your question, will it close the gap a little bit? Sure. And this is, of course, assuming that all 50,000 meet the cybersecurity skill sets that they're looking for. But again, that gap is going to continue to grow in the foreseeable future. And how do we how do we close that gap, right? And Andre had a couple recommendations there.
And Andre and Warren, to kind of push that a little bit, one way to kind of conceptualize this is, yes, we have, when we say academia, many times we think of our STEM schools as being responsible for this and reaching out to government and industry for these types of partnerships to better understand what skill sets do you need, what gaps do you have, how can we better bring these into our programs, what kind of maybe grants are available, what kind of projects can we perhaps collaborate on. But at the same time, another way to think about this also is that we have this great opportunity to reach across units within academia and work with our partners in the School of Education, where they can start reaching down further and start cultivating those K through 12 individuals to get them interested in the field of cybersecurity. Because without that kind of help, we can create all kinds of content that we want at the higher ed level. But if we're not working to partner with others to get our teachers in those elementary schools, captivating those minds, it's going to be really hard to continue to grow that pipeline. And Andre and Warren, I don't know what you guys, what comments you might have on, getting high school students involved in these careers, or even if high school is too late. In some cases, I might even say that, developing these, not just the skill sets, but the education. If we wait till high school, many students are already thinking in middle school that, they kind of want to know what they want to be when they grow up. But how do we further cultivate that?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question. I think high school is a great time to start. And I'm just judging by myself, but I think about 9th or 10th grade, I started thinking about what it is that I want to do after I graduate. But maybe middle school is also. So the Department of Education, I think that's another great networking opportunity there. So maybe the Department of Education can also be engaged. And maybe there's a way that you can actually sort of cultivate the future generation of teachers in K through 12 that can actually, kind of grow the future cybersecurity workforce. So it could be a multi-year, like a decade-long type of a cultivation process. That's one thing. The other thing I was going to say is, as I sort of talk to a lot of different people, and especially like I do know some people at Amazon, what I will say is that none of them got fired, and these people are all working like cybersecurity. And they actually, as a matter of fact, got all pay raises and stuff like that. And they're all like getting paid like enormous amount of money. So I think there's, the need for those skilled professionals, I think is still going to be there. And I think that growing those skilled professionals, I think that's the thing that is extremely important. And I think this is where academia comes in, especially with a graduate degree. Somebody who has a bachelor's and been working in the field with a graduate degree, with a master's, or even a doctorate degree in cybersecurity, that's an extremely important boost for that person to stay in the field, in that company, into foreseeable future. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity to not just teach the subject matter, but also to provide guidance on how the subject matter can be taught to different learning styles and different levels. And so that's one thing that can also really help move the profession to be a little bit more diverse, if you will. I do want to be respectful of our individuals in the room. Do we have any more questions from our audience that are there in person?
Yes, I have a question. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. My name is Donald Travis. I'm a managing editor of Armed Forces and Society. And my question is related to what you were talking about when you said that academia should be corresponding or communicating with the government. So as you know, part of the government is the military, although many people would not consider that to be the case. But you are talking about cybersecurity. So therefore, the military is heavily involved. You have the intelligence community, and many parts of the intelligence community is also intertwined with the Department of Defense, the United States Department of Defense. So my question to you, I wanted to ask the panel about your perspective on this, what cyber security is doing in shaping the intersection between the armed forces and society.
Okay, Warren, unless you want to take this one, let me know.
You go ahead, Andre. I can follow up. That's fine.
Sure. So government in general is a really big, juicy target for a lot of people out there. the government has information. A lot of that information is really maybe sometimes even benign to an average person. Like the number of, I have a student, a doctoral student, and we were talking about. So he's working on this project where he's pulling a lot of data from the FAA. It's a number of airplane malfunctions in the last, I don't know, 10 or 20 years or whatever it is. And so information that is not necessarily even relevant to a very vast majority of the people on this planet, but if that data was corrupted, then it becomes extremely important. So cybersecurity is not purely on the industry or the military or the intel community. The government as a whole is a very big, juicy target for a lot of different people. And so that's why it's important to actually understand that cybersecurity is, that need for cybersecurity is only going to get worse. And it's even more so, I believe, in the DoD. The DoD is also a very big target that a lot of people would love to get their hands on out there. And it's not just to steal the data. Sometimes it's to corrupt the data. Sometimes it's to plant false data. There's so many different ways that you can actually go towards think about data, but it kind of feeds into this CIA triad. The integrity of the data is extremely important. The I within the CIA. So I think cybersecurity, absolutely, and I think the government is going to be one of the biggest consumers of cybersecurity into the foreseeable future. And I believe the DoD is going to be one of the biggest consumers of cybersecurity in the foreseeable future. And even the intel community is going to be one of the biggest consumers of cybersecurity. Although I'm sure the government does more than just cybersecurity as well. Thank you.
And I want to make sure that again, I want to be clear. I'm not speaking on behalf of CISA or the FBI or the National Guard here. This is just my personal opinion here. So I totally agree. It is not the challenge that we have is not something that can be addressed purely by academia. Federal government absolutely has a role to play here, and subcomponents of the federal government, whether it be the IC or DoD or just the federal civilian executive branch in general, right? So non-IC, non-DoD, all of them have a role to play in this. And I think what you will find is there are programs that exist, and you guys are probably aware of NSA type academic partnerships. NSA puts a stamp on a number of academic institutions that have cyber programs there. That kind of already exists, but I don't think that's necessary enough. And I think to Nicole's point earlier, it may be a little too late that they're putting the stamp of approval purely at the the college and university level. But it's a start. Separately, CISA, as a federal organization, recognizes that it is also has a role to play here in developing that future talent within the U.S. So there are opportunities there. There are grants, whether it's research grants or grants for lower than university and college level cyber skilling academies, for example. So that exists, but again, I don't think it is enough at this point. If it was enough, what we would see is that gap starting to close, right? But it is not at this point. The gap is continuing to grow. So there needs to be a combined effort across academia, federal government. Everyone needs to get involved in this, recognizing the gap that is there, and coming up with a really, really comprehensive way to address it. And I'm not sure, again, that we're there yet, but there are, pockets here and there that exist. The DoD, for example, they recruit out of, high school programs. They stand on campuses sometimes and try to get, these really, really, talented, STEM individuals to join. The challenge is going to remain, though, the pay piece, right? So if you think about what the DoD did over the last, let's call it 4 years or so, roughly, let's call it roughly 4 years, they spent well over $150 million just in retention bonuses, right? And for these cyber skills, that's a lot of money. But when you train someone, you can get these skills and they move over to private industry and they're making 250. How do you get them to keep some sort of footprint within the DoD? I think that's a challenge. Separately, even on the federal side, the pay scale through OPM doesn't match what we'll get on the private side, right? So while we may want to fill our ranks with very skilled cybersecurity professionals, it is likely that we're not going to be able to get the cream of the crop on the federal side because we simply cannot compete with the private sector. So while even if we try to address this, we are going to run into a situation where the skill sets that we're looking for are more than likely going to reside in the private sector, where the pay is commensurate with what they're looking for right now. So that itself is a challenge that we're going to work for. I think recently, probably within the last month or so, OPM is looking at a special salary rate, I think we call it SSR, for the cybersecurity field. And I think that may go some of the way to closing the gap. But if my memory serves me correctly, it's kind of scaled across. If you think of like a GS5 step 1, for example, may see an increase in pay of about 26%, 25 or 26%. While a GS15 step 1 may only see like a 3% increase, right? Because there's pay caps associated with federal pay. I think that's going to be the challenge there. So on the GS15 side, you're probably going to top out, to be very frank with you, it's somewhere about 180,000. But on the private side, you're going to routinely see people get paid 250, 275, $300,000 a year. Really, really skilled cybersecurity professionals that we're not going to be able to attract into the federal workforce.
Warren and Andre, thanks for those comments. And I kind of want to follow up on, I see pay as being one thing, but when you start to, we're thinking now cybersecurity, we're thinking government, we're thinking intelligence. Now we're talking secrets, right? And this problem is very much a problem that it's not just the government's problem. It's not just society's problem. We have to work together to resolve these issues. And so if any kind of world event has told you, people don't trust the government. And so when you say, hey, we're the government, trust us, what's going to happen is you're going to have all these memes floating around that, have people do the exact opposite. And so really where the field needs to go is to continue to do these types of conferences that bring together academic professionals from the field, that can be done in an open source way, open to the public. And then you can also get our government liaisons involved too, where we can speak openly in certain sessions, and then also in a closed manner to get some business done as well. One of the challenges that academics often encounter, especially when they work on government projects, is this concern about, well, is my work going to be known to the public, or am I going to have to sign a non-disclosure because now I've just worked on a government project? These are all very valid concerns and things that we as a community need to work together on. The same thing, other questions arise in academia, especially when you talk about crossing bridging some of these academic practitioner gaps, is what practitioners and what academics can I work with? Being from the United States, do we have to be cautious about different nations that we partner with? These are things that are not spoken, but need to be openly addressed by communities. So that way we can create some type of ethical standards that we operate by, things along those lines. One thing that history has demonstrated in the anthropology field is that there is such a thing as weaponized anthropology. And for that reason, anthropological societies have come out with standards when it comes to working with government and what those standards look like. And so Andre and Warren, you could probably speak to better to the cybersecurity field in terms of if there is a main organization that has those types of standards. I can say, speaking from an intelligence studies standpoint, we don't have that. There is nothing like that in place. And so that could be a great way to start when it comes to building out these partnerships. So that way people know that they're operating in a space that makes sense. Any other questions from the audience? I believe we have a few more minutes. Mauricio, maybe you can let me know if I'm off track on that.
Thank you for those answers. They were all excellent. I think you covered a good spectrum. I'm going to put this over here. Has a question.
I see we have 5 minutes left for final remarks. So if there's no other questions from the audience, oh, I think I see the microphone being
Hi.
passed.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole. Appreciate that. Andrea, Warren, thank you for your presentation. My name is Ardian Shaikovsky, and I'm here from ACTRI. You talked a little bit earlier about the need for the academia and the preparedness within the academia realm. Could you maybe, again, that's, you know, as a you know, as an exercise of topic and subject areas that could be potentially pursued in the academia, could you point out what are some of the areas that academia can be focusing on? Right now, we know China, Russia, there's a lot of cybersecurity threats coming from, you know, state actors as well as non-state actors. What would be some other options potentially, again, for within the subject topics area we could be pursuing? Thank you.
So I guess I could talk a little bit from, and again, please keep in mind, this is just the way I see the world, right? I'm not saying this is the solution to all of our problems. But I think the hands-on experience is extremely important. You know, cybersecurity is not English language. They're a little bit different things. So while we still need to do the gen ed where people learn how to write, you know, and how to think critically in these things, but we also need to have that hands-on experience of actually touching some of the hardware, you know, knowing what a switch is, what type of cables go from a switch to a host versus a router to router, right? So, and I think that hands-on experience is extremely important. And I think this is where academia can really focus. And there's a lot of really good free tools out there available under the wire, over the wire. And this is actually something that's going to be even leveraged in high schools. I think Cisco has been phenomenal with, you know, pushing out like the packet tracer. You know, it gives you, even in a virtual environment, you almost are forced to have this like hands-on experience in a virtual environment because you actually have to go out and program these virtual servers and routers out there. There are a lot of free virtual tools out there that you can leverage. Or if you're in a physical environment, maybe actually having a stack of switches, a stack of routers, you know, that you can have programming a few computers here and there. Then you can maybe spin up a few virtual machines and you can start connecting them. So I think that hands-on experience is extremely important for academia, because when the person actually goes out of the field, you know, the person is not going to be working on purely presentations. You know, that person, that cybersecurity specialist, will have to actually work with hardware. So that's my take on things, is like academia has to be a little bit more hands-on in cybersecurity. We have to expose the students to the type of hardware they may expect to see out there, the type of programming languages they could expect to see out there. And then at the same time, you know, give them the gen ed education as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Andre on this. And whether it's just, you know, general IT and, you know, education, general, you know, cyber, call it awareness. I think that's a great place to, you know, to start early with kids, and as they progress, you know, potentially the ones who become interested in this type of in the industry and in this type of career path, you know, guiding them down hands-on skills, so to speak, right? So think about forensics, for example, right? You know, how do you go about pulling apart you know, a piece of malware and identifying, you know, an indicator of compromise, for example? That's a skill set that organizations are looking for on their forensic teams and their hunt teams and stuff like that. So I think that's important. And again, it's that is not going to be for everyone, but where you identify, you know, that type of interest, you know, foster it and develop it. There are going to be, you know, those folks who absolutely just want to dive into stuff like forensics, or into malware analysis, or into reverse engineering, for example. Let them get their hands on with NSA's Ghidra. I mean, that's a free open source tool that they can go and download and use. You know, that's the type of stuff that, you know, these organizations are really looking for. and it will help them get their foot in the door into cybersecurity careers.
Thank you both. I appreciate it. Very insightful answers. Thank you.
Well, I think we have, yeah, I think that's our time. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Andre, Warren, thank you for the great discussions and the great questions from our audience there live. We really appreciate it. And I'm sure if you have questions, you can reach out to Andre, Warren, or even myself through the Hoover system.
Thank you all very much, and hope you all have a really great day. Thank you.
Yeah, you too, Warren. Thanks.
Thanks, Warren.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was such a wonderful conversation. Super engaging.
Yep, happy to do it anytime.
Cool. Thank you. See you around in the summit.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Enjoy the rest of the conference.
You too.